Thank you all for being here. Thank you all so much for your support and obviously your love for not only this venue and the Williams sisters, but the community as a whole. And seeing that this afternoon and the love that's in the room is really inspirational to me, as I hope it is for all of you. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing to you all one of my favorite ESPN commentators. She hosts the 6 p.m. Sports Center. She's always been engaged in speaking and talking and feeling passionate about current issues, so there's no better person that I feel to moderate today than Miss Jemele Hill from ESPN.
All right, thank you guys for having me. Thank you for including me in what is an important community conversation. So hopefully we'll get a chance to exchange some ideas, to learn, and to hear what I think are some powerful personal testimonies. So I will not delay this any longer. I'll introduce our wonderful and esteemed panel. All right, starting off, Mr. Anton House, who is now at Howard University, a doctoral candidate. He's a mentor right here at the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center, mentor and tutor, and hopefully, I'm sure he'll share his incredible testimony with us throughout this panel. Tamika Mallory, a dynamic social justice leader, activist, co-coordinator of the first ever Women's March. Malik Yoba, although most of us know him as an actor, his resume is quite extensive when it comes to community work. He's a musician, educator, inspirational speaker, author, and an entrepreneur. Dr. Sharoni LIttle. She's the COO of the Yetunde Price Resource Center, founder of the Strategist Company, and associate professor of clinical management communication at the University of Southern California Marshall School of Business. And finally, and certainly last but not least, as has been mentioned and will be mentioned throughout, we're all here today to celebrate the Williams Sisters Fund and their outstanding endeavor of opening the Yetunde Price Resource Center in honor of their oldest sister, which is located in Compton, California. So please welcome the authors of what I consider to be the greatest American sports story. Don't at me or debate me. Please welcome the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena. Okay, as mentioned, the point of our conversation is to discuss violence in the community, how it impacts us personally, and of course, coming up with real solutions and strategies to stem the tide of violence and reach young people who are impacted and traumatized by it every day. I think a good place to start is on a personal level. So I would love for each of the panelists to just give us a brief personal statement about how violence has impacted your life and how it's changed or altered and shaped your perspective on such a massive issue. Venus, you get the pleasure of going first.
This is why I'm in the seat first.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you everyone for being here. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and to see new faces as well. And thank you for supporting this. Obviously, violence has hit very close to home in our family and families of loved ones. And it's not easy, but the best part of it all is we have memories, and through it we become stronger, and also through it we're able to help other people. And so to take the opportunity to help the community, to help others, and to turn that pain into hope, that's very important.
For me, having grown up in Compton, I've witnessed firsthand a lot of violence, and unfortunately, 2 of my uncles were killed in Compton. And so it is very personal. Also being a mother of twin 19-year-old sons growing up in Compton, really dealing with on a daily basis the safety issues and really the trauma for families. This was also a personal opportunity to recognize how we can transform the community, but also honor the lives and legacies of all of those that we've lost.
For me, growing up in the post-industrial Midwest society, violence was pretty much a part of my neighborhood. I grew up as a gangster disciple in the Midwest. So a lot of the boys of my age in the 90s, we started joining gangs in order to self-identify as males, and to have a group to hang around with that would support us and to assist us, and also to help finance our society, our communities, and the houses that we came from, because a lot of our parents were struggling with their own addictions. So basically being a part of a street organization was sort of like a surrogate family. However, I started to see like how the surrogate family was pretty much problematic, because a lot of my friends, they started killing each other in response to the drug trade. My god brother killed his cousin, and then my cousin killed my best friend. So it was growing up in this street life that I began to see how these things conflict, and participating in street violence as a gang member, you know, it changed the way that I saw a lot of things and made me want to change personally as an individual.
First, I want to just say thank you all for having me, the Williams sisters, and also Ms. Berry for having me to be a part of this discussion today. You know, my story is deeply personal as well. My son's father was murdered when my son was just 2 years old. He's now 18 and in his first year at Morehouse. And he was killed, shot twice, and left in a ditch for 2 weeks before his body was discovered. So by the time I saw him, photos of him after a long trial, he was completely decomposed, and the only thing that we were able to use to identify him was a tattoo that he got on his neck right before my son's birthday of my son's name. And it was actually the tattoo that was used to identify him and how they were able to trace back where he lived. Because the people who killed him in Philadelphia, where they left him, he obviously had no ID and nothing else. And so I was very embarrassed about it, because I came from a pretty good family, 2 parents in a household. We lived in a good community. I had been educated in Catholic school, and to have to tell people that my son's father was murdered would, you know, ultimately result in folks looking at him as a thug and saying, what were you doing with him, and how come you had a baby at 18 years old anyway? And so I knew that that would be sort of folks' impression, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. But what quickly happened is that I began to meet too many other women, particularly black young women, who also did not have their children's father. And the same story, they were being shot and killed. And I quickly understood that it was nothing for me to be embarrassed about, but that America needs to be embarrassed, because there was something happening to young black men and no one was doing anything about it. And so I committed myself to that work, and that's the work that I do today.
My father was born in 1927 in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. A couple of years ago, I went to that town, steel mill town, to see where my father was from. I heard stories about how his father used to tie him to a chair and beat him as a form of discipline. So as the 4th child of 6 in my family growing up, born in the Bronx, raised in Harlem, I got beat the most with extension cords until my skin split. I remember seeing a movie like 12 Years a Slave when the female character was being whipped on the screen. It was on the left side of the screen. I remember not being able to look at that image because it reminded me of what it was like in 2nd grade and 3rd grade, forgetting a bad report card, talking back to a teacher, not cleaning the house. So my father's form of punishment was get naked and beat you with an extension cord. And first time I had a gun put to my head, I was 12. So growing up in that kind of house, you know, I developed, I never really personalized it as, on a conscious level. Subconsciously, obviously, it's in my physical and that sense memory. But I always saw more hope. As my sister always said, you know, you always dance to the beat of your own drummer. So I remember being in the hood, there was a kid named Wallace that was always in and out of prison. And I was messing around with his cousin. I was 12. And Wallace put a gun to my head at 12 years old. I'm like, shoot me. At 15, I actually got shot leaving high school. Leaving school, there's a fight in the street. There's 9 kids beating up on one kid on 50th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue in New York City, where there's now a Worldwide Plaza. But in 1983, it was a big parking lot. And I'm watching these kids beat this kid. One had a golf club, one had a baseball bat. And I studied martial arts at the time. And my words were, I wish a nigga would. And so I learned early the power of intention and the power of thought. Because 2 things I carried with me as a kid. I used to wonder what it felt like to get shot. Why? Because of where I grew up, perhaps. Number 2, I see these kids beating this kid, and I literally said, I wish a would. And before I knew it, another kid pushed me so they could push people out the way to beat this kid up. I pushed him back, and I was ready to fight all of them. I didn't care that they had a golf club and a baseball bat. I was prepared to fight them. Before I knew it, another kid grabs me around the neck, throws me on the ground, and tells a third kid to shoot me. So there's a bullet wound on the side of my neck. And at the time, I was going to a high school called Park West. They used to call it the Wild Wild West. Kids were never caught. Actually, I went to the police lineup, and the kid that shot me was a Latino kid with curly hair, mustache, wore a leather jacket. Apparently, the cops kind of knew who the kid was, or thought they knew, but the kid shaved. So they did a lineup where they put wigs on these kids and mustaches, and I couldn't tell who was who. So the kid was never arrested. But I remember telling my father at the time, had you let me go to that performing arts high school, I wouldn't have gotten shot. And then he subsequently let me go to another school called Julia Richmond that had a program called Talent Unlimited, and I was able to get back to the theater where I started as a kid. And so it was at that time, at 15 years old, that I recognized that I could really do some stuff. And I committed my life since the age of 15, I'm now 50, to a life of service.
Well, violence has affected our lives personally. We lost our sister. She was the oldest to violence. But I think what people don't realize is how violence really affects not only your family, but your friends, your neighbors, everyone. And I'm going to stop there. Maybe I can help her continue. Also, violence not only affects the victim's family, but also the family of the perpetrator. It ruins their lives as well. If you're a mother or a father, it's not your plan to have your child commit this. It ruins lives. I think one of the hardest days of all of our lives was having to tell our sisters' children what had happened to their mom. You can't prepare for that. As we were growing up on the tennis courts in Compton, California, some of the cars were not new, and there was also gunfire. So if a car backfired, we knew to hit the ground because it sounded very similar to a gun. So between the gunshots and the cars backfiring, we were always hitting the ground. Our dad always had us get back up and practice, though. And I remember one afternoon there was a drive-by, and we hit the ground. Guy got out the sunroof and started shooting, and we went back to practice. And our dad didn't want us to keep secrets in our family, so he didn't tell us not to tell our mom. And so, of course, when we went home, we were so young, we didn't understand the gravity of it all, thank God. And the first thing we were like, Mom, there was a drive-by, and my mom was just so upset. So upset. But, unfortunately, as sometimes a young person, you can get used to that. And no one should have to get used to that. No one should have to get used to that. And hopefully we're able to step by step do things to change that in the community. And the times that we cannot change it, what we want to do is to remember the person that has passed, and that's what's so beautiful about the Yetunde Price Resource Center, is that we couldn't have prepared for this, but now there's something beautiful coming out of it.
Yeah, I wrote for newspapers before I got to ESPN, and my coworkers used to laugh at me because sometimes we'd be on press row, and if you know these arenas during basketball games, they get very fancy with the pyrotechnics. And so I grew up in Detroit, and so whenever they'd have a fireworks show, I just automatically, just duck because I was used to hearing, gunfire. And you're right, Venus, as a kid, when you're growing up in that, you don't even realize the trauma you're going through. It becomes something you're disassociated with. It becomes a part of the background, almost like wallpaper. And so I think it's important that we almost started there from the beginning, from the root of it. And Dr. Little, yes, I'm going to call you doctor this entire conversation, as someone who is on the ground floor doing the work in the community with the Yetunde Price Center. When we think about violence, and there's a ton of reasons why it happens in communities like Compton, Detroit, all the places that all of us represent, where do you believe the problem stems from? Is this an economic issue? Is this an educational issue? What do you see as the root causes of this community violence that seems to have plagued particularly African American communities for as long as it has?
Well, Jemele, I think it's really multifaceted, and all of those things that you mentioned, economics, education, it really is systemic and historical, and unfortunately, in many communities of color, intentional. And I think we have to just really recognize that and have conversations about the way in which we can shift the narrative, because oftentimes for communities of color, they are described, they are viewed as non-humane, non-important, and therefore violence begets violence. However, we need to, and what we're wanting to do and doing now with the Yetunde Price Resource Center is shifting that. We are disrupting the narrative around disadvantage. We're moving from this deficit to an asset and finding ways to address the trauma, because when you begin to normalize from an early age, you see signs of depression, you see signs of mental health, and that is some of the stem root of the violence. And when you don't find value in yourself, if you hear the narratives about why you are not important, why you don't matter, then you will not see the value. And so what we're wanting to do in Compton at the Resource Center, as well as other communities, is to say, you matter to us. And this is the way in which your life will matter, through education, through workforce development, through professional development, through creativity. And as a broader community, we have to stand up, as Tamika said, and say enough is enough.
Anton, you have something to add?
Also, I agree with Dr. Little. It's a multifaceted issue, but also economics plays a large part. I'm from Wisconsin, and Wisconsin leads the nation when incarcerating black males. In a 24/7 Wall Street article, my city, Racine, Wisconsin, was number 4, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin was the 3rd city that blacks shouldn't live in. And growing up, the factories that brought my grandparents up from Mississippi, they weren't there when I became a young man. But my state, Wisconsin, invested in the prison industrial economy. So one of the things that when I was finally incarcerated and convicted, I was paying my debt upstate in places that no longer produce dairy or the produce for the urban areas in that state. From being close to the issue, I started to see how the captain was pretty much married to the AODA counselor, and the lieutenant, his cousin, worked in the kitchen. So at one point in time where you had a factory in which a grandfather, a father, and a grandson would work in that factory, prisons are set up like that now. So understanding the root problem that is economics, the guy referred to us, a prison guard referred to us young black males as job security, which meaning that we would always come back. So we understand that they're projecting how many prisons to build for young black men based upon the 3rd grade test. We have to challenge that. We have to be more creative than our ancestors was after slavery. After slavery, they established voluntary associations. They created an ethnic economy that became the buffer so black people wouldn't end up on the chain gang. A lot of the things that we can solve today, we have to revisit from our past and reinstate.
Yeah, great, Anton. I want to pick up on that and just make one point in terms of intentionality. When you talk about building more prisons, the other component that we have to be mindful of is that many corporations are having their products made in these prisons, where prisoners are making 2-4 cents an hour, sometimes not being paid at all, definitely not receiving any real medical benefits. If you build, McDonald's or any fast food chain in a particular community and people get sick in that particular franchise, there's an inspection, people come in, close it down until things are worked out. But in the prison system, it doesn't work that way. There's no one coming to check, there's no one policing the police, and these corporations are making big money off of having these prisoners doing labor for them. And if we want to really look back at how this started, if you look in the Constitution right now, and we know that Ava DuVernay had a film on the 13th Amendment called the 13th, where it talks about how the Constitution currently says that black people are free until you commit a crime. So once you commit a crime, they have the right to basically commit you to indentured servitude, which is going back into prison. And I think that the real crime is, because we don't want people to pull out of prisons and not give people the opportunity to work. Sometimes that's the only thing that a prisoner gets to do all day long, is to go to their job, to make, car products and what have you. But the crime is that when a person gets out of prison, if they have a federal record, they may not even be able to go and get a job at the same corporation that they worked for while they were inside. That is an American crime. And we have to be very mindful of how all of these things tie to our politics. We often hear people of color say, I'm not into politics. But if you have a family member in prison, and even if you drive across a bridge every day, your life depends on politics, and we have to be engaged.
So Malik, as somebody who, from an early age, you obviously experienced violence yourself, but later you were drawn to community activism and really being there on the ground. So from your vantage point, how can we empower these communities that are suffering from violence? Because that's the word empower that you, Dr. Little, used a lot when talking about the resource center. So how can we make people in the community feel more empowered and in control of what's happening in their communities?
Anybody feel out of control by show of hands in their community? Who feels out of control in their community? Who is that right there? Who is that? Who are you? What's your name? Come here. Yes, you. Come here. Because it ain't just about us. I want to hear why you feel out of control. What's your name?
Alice McFarland.
Can we welcome Alice to the community? I see you, John Murray. Is that all we're going to give Alice? Give her some more. Give her some more. Give her some more. Because she's on the flip side of feeling empowered. So let's unpack this. Why do you feel disempowered?
One factor is that I'm a single parent. I live in Ward 8, and the environment in which I live in currently, the young people have taken over. So it's no policing, and I am of the community. So it's disheartening to see the new generation not being concerned about the older people or the younger people. So it's just out of control.
So let me stop you right there. What are you doing about it?
A lot. I am also in the community. I volunteer, and I'm also trying to create a program that addresses trauma in Ward 7 and Ward 8.
See, God is good. Go ahead. Because I was going to talk about that. So the piece about trauma, I do some work with Safe Horizons, which works with domestic violence in New York. Their focus has been women, but I was part of a group putting together initiatives to deal with men. So I've dealt with trauma my entire life. I didn't recognize it as trauma. I thought getting beat was normal until I was 23 years old and I worked with the City Kids Foundation, and I was explaining how I used to get beat as a kid. And I said, yeah, my father used to beat me. I'm saying it casually, and my boss said, you were abused. I was like, no. She goes, no, you were abused. And I never thought about that. So number one, I'm glad you're doing that work because it's so important in addressing that, particularly with males. But the other thing is My father had a lot of qualities. Although he learned from his folks before him corporal punishment, he also taught us how to hustle. And he always said, build your own generator so when they turn off the power, you still have lights. So I believe in creation, whether it's writing a play. As kids, we used to write plays and perform them and charge our parents a quarter to come see them. And I love being in this part of the world because cities like DC and Baltimore, whenever I've come through with plays, they show a lot of love and we sell out. More recently, I've gotten into real estate development. So currently in Baltimore, in the west side of Baltimore, Poppleton District, we have 14 acres, black-owned development company, La Cité Development. I've started Yoba Development. We want to build one of these there. I've been texting my partner, like, we have to build this where we're building. We're building in a community where for 50 years there's been no development. We're building some of the largest units in the city. Best views, 80-20. The affordable housing is going to have the same Class A finishes as the market rate housing. We're inviting friends and family to invest. So we literally had a meeting on Tuesday with a PR company, and they said to us, we hear developers come into the community all the time and talk about we're of the community, we're in the community, but we hear words, but with y'all, and this is 3 black men. I'm the oldest at 50. My partners are in their 40s. We had the property for the last 13 years. We've had to go through tremendous challenges just to put a shovel in the ground, but we held on because we understand in the community where, number one, Baltimore is a city of 2 cities, East Baltimore and West Baltimore. The white folks have never come to the west side, but we're building a property that's inviting everyone that's in this room. If you're looking for a spot, we got you. July 2018, we opened 262 units. That's phase 1 of building a community that ultimately can house 7,000 people. And so for us, we could take knees all day long, or we can get busy and putting shovels in the ground, learning financing, learning engineering, learning architecture, learning marketing, learning the political side. You talked about politics. It's important to understand how to have communications with politicians to say, this is what we need to build in a place where no one is building, where no one wants to come. Just like this facility where there were crackheads. That's what's happening in West Baltimore. But we're saying, we're here. We're here for you, and we're including you. So for me, I don't generally, even though it may not seem like it because I'm talking for 5 minutes, I don't like panels. I like to get busy. So that's my answer.
Well, I think it goes without saying that model was obviously not only established here, but clearly it was established in Compton. And what I find to be one of the fascinating and great parts about the Yetunde Price Center is that looking at the options available, that creative therapy is a huge part of what you all do there. And Venus and Serena, I know you guys, you have interest in fashion and the arts, and you've been able to find outlets for your creative juices that obviously go beyond the tennis court. So Serena, I'm interested to hear from you, is that why do you think creative therapy is so important, especially for young people in these communities?
Well, creative therapy is, I think, extremely important because it's a way to express yourself and to get, whether it's anger or frustration or emotion, out. Even though I play tennis, I still have this creative outlet on the court or in design to kind of put myself out there and to just get all these emotions out on the court. And there's a lot of times where people are in the communities and they don't have a place, or they don't have an area, or they don't have somewhere they can go to put that energy, to get, you know, some of this negative energy out, and to be creative. And I feel like it just really is able to express yourself and express ways that you can feel. And at the Yetunde Price Center in Compton, there's 2 kids that were, I think Tyrone and Harmony was their names, and they were really reluctant to participate in a lot of the activities. You know, they've had a really, really tough life. But eventually, we were trying different ways to help them, and eventually we became, to this art and in a creative way. And they really were able to respond so well to that, and then they became more involved, they became more active, and then they actually started asking people, like, can I come to this more often? How do I get to be a part of this? So it's definitely a really good outlet for be with the creative part. Yes, Serena said it best. But for young people, sometimes it's hard to express. So it's a safe place when you can express yourself in another mode that maybe doesn't use words, and it gives a freedom, and it allows you to open up.
Now, Dr. Little, I know that, oh, sorry, you had
Yeah,
something to
I
add.
was going to say we have a feature similar called Blacks in Wax at the Southeast Henderson Learning Center. And basically, in the beginning, can we get a hand for Blacks in Wax? So basically, in the beginning, kids are reluctant to do it because they understand it's going to be rigorous, it's going to be strenuous, and we're going to put you to work. You're going to have to research. But it's in the research part that a lot of these kids come in contact with their ancestors. They study individuals from the past as well as contemporary individuals who they eventually end up emulating. And through Ms. Sheba, we receive these scripts in which we put together, and the children, they study them. They practice. So with this, not only do they learn about their past, but they're also going through a process in which they're developing public speaking skills. They're also standing in front of large crowds. They're also getting over whatever hangups or fears they may have with public talking. So we got to invest in a way that I hate to say social engineering, but you bring these kids along the way and you educate them with things that they can utilize to uplift them and help them be better. And Ms. Berry, she has done that within this community, because all the kids who are reluctant in the beginning, at the end of Blacks in Wax, they say, when can I do it again? Who can I be next year? When does Blacks in Wax start?
And Dr. Little, I know it's still in the early going, and you all are barely scratching the surface, so what you can accomplish with the center. But already, what's the sense that you get in the community about how this resource center has maybe changed how they feel about the community, and has it become, a bit of a draw around there? Like, explain to us, like, what's happening in real time as you're seeing things.
Okay, and just building off what Anton said, a lot of times people will tell you who you are if you don't know who you are. And so for me, having grown up in Compton and recognizing that the historical narrative around Compton and its value has been very difficult. And so with the Resource Center, a lot of times people were coming to say they wanted to do work in Compton, bring money into Compton, but suspiciously they disappeared. And so unfortunately, what we had is that a lot of people were working in silos, or we really didn't have a lot of resources. And so what the Resource Center has allowed us to do was to bring partners to the table. And we didn't want to replicate what was already being done, but we wanted to add value. And going back to the story that Serena was talking about with Tyrone and Harmony, these young people were formerly homeless, and they didn't have any value. Their mother was very suspicious. But when we brought them in and said, no, you're not going to cut up, and I love you anyway. And we started a reading book club for them. And so as you use education, and as you use identity, and as you recognize and tell them, no, this is not your history, this is your history, they begin to transform, and we hold really high expectations for them. And children in all communities, especially in Compton, rise to those expectations.
Well, I know we have to wrap up here, and so I'll ask you all finally a question for all of you to answer. Is you all have such a tremendous platform. You're using it with your voice and your actions. So just give us some idea of how you're using that platform to influence other people who have maybe not your same stature, but have a stature, have a platform. Give them the reason of why they should kind of follow the course that you did, where you're building a resource center, you're doing things here, you guys are active in your community. How can you influence others to do and connect and activate the way that you did? And so, Venus, I'm going to pick on you and start with you. I know.
Well, What I have found is growing up, my dream was to win big tournaments and to be a champion, but I had no idea that I would be involved with things that were so much bigger than me and beyond my dreams. So it's been a wonderful experience to be a part of the Yetunde Price Resource Center, to be a part of the Southeast Tennyson Learning Center, and multiple other things that I've been involved in. For me, to be able to give my time is a great honor. And then I think the best part is when people see you doing something, they want to be a part of it. And so just by doing something positive with your life, you motivate others, and then those others actually motivate you to do better. So it becomes this circle of positivity, and that's what I love about it.
I'll say, thank you. I'll say again, being an example, it was very important for me after I came back from grad school. I'm an educator at a university, and oftentimes when I say I live in Compton, people thought that that was a disconnect. And I really love the mayor coming up, because when children see someone like them from their community actually doing something positive, it really does give them hope. And so I think more of us need to be thoughtful about not trying to escape, but being thoughtful about when you talk about where you escape from, their babies still in those communities. And so I think it's important for us to be examples and to let them know, while I'm a professor and I'm a doctor, I'm someone like you and I love you.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well, because you had an opportunity to move back, but also going back to the community and being in the community and being seen in the community. And if you don't live there, it helps others to come back and build.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I always found was that some of the harshest critics on the black family and community dysfunction are black people who benefited from the best culturally, financially, socially, and spiritually of black America before the crack epidemic. So these individuals, they criticize much as due to these young individuals who grew up reacting to their environment. I was 13 when I licked the yellow off of a lemon head and sold it for a $20 piece of crack rock. And from that time until I was 21, I pretty much sold drugs and gangbang. But it wasn't until I got incarcerated and started reading that I had the opportunity to reflect upon my lifestyle, that I saw the majority of all of us were living a reactionary lifestyle. We were reacting to disappointment, we were reacting to instability, and we were reacting to pain. So as I move into the future, I always try to reach out to those brothers and try to work with them, because a lot of these brothers, I hate to say this, they want to be real, but if you ask them, what is that? They'll give you the adjectives that describe a person of integrity and honor. When they say they want to be a gangster, they want to be somebody that's confident. Unfortunately, not enough men stayed in those environments to be those things for these boys. So they had to identify what was there. So one of the things that as the preacher would say, the black community is going to have a come to Jesus moment. We're going to have a not only external but internal discussions, because when Daquan gets a tattoo on his face, everyone says he's opted out of society, that he's not going to be anything but an inmate. But you can have a cat like Joe that has the tattoos and the stretched earlobes, and they'll think he works in IT and with computers. So it's like looking at that and understanding, how do we put value in the lives of these young boys? Because the only value the state's seeing these young boys as prisoners. So we got to invest in these boys. We have to give them exposure. Most of these young boys have a territorialized identity. They haven't been outside of a certain square block. It wasn't until my cousin brought me out here to see Howard University homecoming that it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it when the first time I went to Howard homecoming. And I constantly brought my friends out here so they can see these things. So we got to make sure we invest in these kids. We got to give them these tech opportunities, because this 3D printing is going to put a lot of people out of business. In our community, we're not as tech savvy as other communities. So that's my point.
I would say what Anton said. Exactly what he said.
Thank you, Melissa.
Plus what?
Thank you for passing the mic down this way. So I always get in trouble everywhere I go because I talk too much. but it's okay because Cora Mastersberry invited me to be here, so I have to say something that is real. You know, my brother, my son, who I travel with often, he and I are a part of a group called Justice League NYC, and our parent organization is called the Gathering for Justice, and Harry Belafonte started that organization after he saw a 5-year-old girl being handcuffed in a classroom because she was being unruly. And he actually pulled together all the leaders that you could think of. I won't name them here so they won't be shamed, but they were the big leaders that we know. And he met with these people, and when he walked away from the meeting, he said nothing is going to happen because everyone in the room had their own deal that they were going to cut and their own purpose for whatever the work was. They weren't trying to listen to a new way or a way that there could be unity among all of them. They were all there with their own self-interest. And so he went and pulled together a group of young people. And those young people over the last 10 years, 12 years actually, have been working. I joined the group. I'm actually not as young as some of them, and have been helping to lead their work. And one of the things that we did together was we marched 250 miles from New York City to Washington, D.C., over 9 days to bring a criminal justice reform package before the federal government. And my son, on that trip while we were traveling together, came up with this piece of poetry that he does all the time, and he actually did it for Blacks in Wax. And it is called You Don't Have the Right to Do Nothing. And I just want to say in this room that it's nice for us to build centers, and it's nice for us to come together and have these conversations. But if we are not willing to take risk, where we step out and say things that make people feel uncomfortable, that puts us in a line of fire, that really shows our young people that it is not our job, our positions, our titles, or any of that that is more important than their lives. And that we are willing to go down with them because they are already down. They are not impressed by us being in this room. Ray Ray and LaToya and others are waiting to see how does what we do in this room, what we discuss in this room, become tangible to them on the ground. And so what I would leave here with is this idea that each one of us has to figure out, are we taking risk or are we just doing what sounds good so we can check a box? Because checking the box will not get the work done for our people.
Malik, unfortunately, I have to play producer here.
It's a family affair.
And that's family.
It's a family affair.
You're just not gonna let me
One
be
child grows up to be. Like, think about it. Think about them lyrics. Somebody to love to learn. Another child.
Look.
So
Wait,
I just want
just real quick. I'm going to play the producer role. This is very ironic because I blow through every stop sign on my show. But if you could make it as brief as possible, I would. Greatly appreciate
No, when I
that,
dropped the
'cause we gotta
mic,
wrap
that
it
was
up,
the
B.
exclamation point because this side of the room said everything. Show up, be present, use your moment. Don't just keep it in the room. Be on the ground. And I just want to finally say, I have to say this. I have a meeting at Oath on Monday. I had no idea that Oath was even part of this. No, Jen, we could rush this,
That's
but
your
people
friend,
are
Jimmy. I
dying.
just want you to know.
I walked off on the 3rd season of New York Undercover for every reason we talking about. People thought it was about money. It wasn't about money. It was because as a Black and Latino starring in the first time in the history of television, leads, I was a teenage father on a show. I was 26 years old when I did that show. I had an 11-year-old son. It was important to me when the writers would write, G does homework watching television. I'm like, no. Turn the TV off, surround the kid with some books. When they would write, JC cooks a TV dinner for his son, I would say, no, props, go get real vegetables and food and let's cook in the scene. There were moments when the writers would say, JC drops G off at school. And I would improv with little George, who was from Oxon Hill, Maryland, George Gore. I would say, kiss me, because my father didn't kiss me like that. Because I understood the platform that I had as a 26-year-old actor that transformed lives. And I can't tell you how many people decided to become police officers because of New York Undercover, how many young people decided that they wanted the relationship they saw on television with their father based on a TV character. So I understood my position in media to make a difference. And so a few months ago, I had the opportunity to meet the head of talent at Oath. I had no idea until last night that Oath was even involved with this. I have a meeting on Monday. I'm going to put it out there. I want to work with Oath because they say Oath is about doing good. And so although I've been talent in front of the camera, it's important to me to write and produce and direct and invest and build buildings. But at the end of the day, it's about telling stories. And any position that we can find ourselves in, to tell a story with love, to lead with love, to go back in history and bring it forward to inspire, to stay active, to use your position, that's what it's about. Was that short enough?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you. Now, see, Serena is different for her. She can go as long as she wants, so y'all just got to deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's super important to really be involved and to, I have a unique opportunity where social media, I think, is such a huge part of everyone's lives, no matter where you're from. Usually people have some sort of social app. So even if you're in your community and you have something to say, you have your network of friends that you have connected through social media, and I think that's a really great way to spread the message that you want to spread and to build that you want to build. And I think if we use our social media more than, that selfie picture, but to really spread that message in the community, whatever it is that we want to spread about violence, about getting together, about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, it could really make a huge impact.
Before we dismiss everyone from the panel, you guys may have missed this earlier, but Venus and Serena's niece has been a tutor here at the Learning Center, and Justice, where is she? Somewhere. Justice, please join us. Also a Howard University graduate, so we got Howard here strongly in the building. And she is HU, and she's a new DC public school teacher, which is amazing. That's amazing. So please welcome Justice Bobbitt.
I hope y'all can hear me because I can't hear myself and I'm not used to doing stuff like this. But I just wanted to get up here and really quickly speak to the importance of why things like the Yetunde Price Resource Center should exist. I want to first let you know that my mom was the most selfless and caring person that I know and that I've ever met in my entire life. And in a way, I live for my mom, I live for her legacy, and it has changed the way I think and the way I move and the way I do things. So I don't live the normal 23-year-old life of fun and partying and drinking on the weekends. I pretty much give my time to teaching. I teach fourth grade math down the street from here, and then I come here, and then I, tutor till 7, all my lovely children. But I went from sleeping in the bed with my mom every night. I slept in her bed until I was 8 years old. And I went pretty much from that to my whole life being shifted. And I feel like to stand up here, I have a privilege that a lot of the kids that we, service don't have. They didn't get the sense of normalcy that I was able to get after the passing of my mom. They get, I have to go right back into it. And I found that out just a few weeks ago, actually, and I was talking to one of my coworkers at the school that I teach at, and there was a little boy who was in the back sleeping, and I'm like, why is he so sleepy? And my coworker was like, well, his cousin just died last night, but his mom sent him on to school, because that's the way that, we learn how to deal with things. We push through. So in 2003, when I lost my mom, my life went from this to a new normal, and I kind of just pushed through, and I pushed through, and I pushed through, and it wasn't until college that I realized that I needed the resources that this center now provides. I got to college at Howard as a freshman, and everybody was, beginning to become homesick, and my roommate would call her mother every day, and then it was at that moment that I realized that I didn't have that. And it wasn't until then, because my family is so close-knit, and they, they guarded me and they protected me. And one thing that I always say is that I lost one mom, but I gained five more. But there was still like a void that I felt like I needed to fill. So it caused me to gain 30 pounds. The depression that I went through, it was tough. And I think that it's important because people grieve at different times. And I just wanted to say, like, maybe when I was 9, if I was able to go through this creative arts program, if I was able to get the grief counseling and sit down and talk to somebody, that moment in my life I would have been able to deal with a little bit better. But I'm still grateful. So everybody's circumstance in life is different. Mine was definitely unique, and I can't speak to the way my aunts felt or the way my grandmother felt. I can only speak to the way it felt for me losing a mom. But I think that it's very important work. So I thank Dr. Little. I thank my aunts for putting so much time and making sure that my mother's legacy is alive and well. And I thank you all for sitting here and listening. So thank you.
Justice, I don't even know you, and I'm proud of you. I'm sure your aunts are also very proud of you as well, and your entire family. You are such a blessing, really. And your testimony is going to change somebody's life in here. I can feel it. I just want to thank all the panelists. Thank you for adding your thoughts, for adding your personal recollections and experiences with violence, and for connecting and staying active. And I think you've given us all a word here that we need to all be more engaged in whatever way that engagement finds us. Everybody isn't built to do it the same way, and that's okay. But you do need to give something, because that's the whole reason why we're here. I just want to thank everybody for coming here, for listening, for engaging, and hopefully you'll leave here feeling inspired and renewed and knowing that you're doing good work out there. So thank you all. Thank all the sponsors. Thank the panelists, and we'll stay up here for pictures.